We're proud to announce live today episodes 1 and 2 of Art of the Surge that are available to watch on tuckercarlson.com. Now, they're the first of a multi-part documentary series. We're going to release episodes weekly on Wednesdays leading up to the election. We've had someone embedded with the Trump campaign. Amazing footage. Art of the Surge available right now, episodes 1 and 2.
Thank you, Steve. I didn't hear what you said. I was chatting up a storm. Yes, I was in the back behind the scenes like a teenage girl. Wow, another thing. Thank you so much for having me. I'm always thrilled to come to Wisconsin. It's the third time I've been here in the last 6 weeks. I'm out of control. I actually feel guilty about it. I feel like I should be paying taxes in Wisconsin. I'm here so much. We come, not that I'm going to. I disapprove of your governor, but they may make me. We're just talking backstage. Most people are from Wisconsin, so I can say this to you. I'm going tomorrow on our annual muskie and grouse trip right at the top in Vilas County. And how did you let Michigan take the top of your state? I don't understand. My wife's from Michigan. She's always like, it's a hand. And I didn't realize that the hand was a grasping hand that steals things, including the top of Wisconsin. And I don't know. I mean, I don't actually really like your state government that much, but it's better than Michigan's. You know, Dana Nessel isn't, in the state government in Wisconsin, and you should get your National Guard and take it back. And they can have the part of the UP that's over, at the top of the Mackinac Bridge. That's totally fine. That's clearly Michigan. That makes sense. But the part that's over the top of Wisconsin is stolen land. And if Mexico can claim Texas, you can definitely claim the Upper Peninsula. And you should, and I mean that. Have some self-respect, Wisconsin. Sorry, I'm not pushing separatism or anything like that. I'm just pushing justice. And I hope it will be done. I know it won't be because people in Wisconsin are so nice and so happy. And that's the main thing I notice when I come here. It's not just about your birds and your fish, which I do love. It's about the state. And this time, actually last time I was here 2 weeks ago, and we were going on one of our long walks through Wisconsin and with my wife. And I was thinking that the thing that I like most about the state is its cohesion. Every town you go to feels like an actual community, not the fake communities you're always hearing about from politicians. The communities they're talking about are like millions of people. You know what I mean? It's some racial group. It's a community, the white community, right? I've never been invited to join. What are you even talking about? They're fake communities. They describe voter blocks as communities. And there's something about that infuriates me because a community is a real thing. It's a living thing. It's an organism. It's a human organism. And it's a beautiful thing when you see it. And it's increasingly rare in the United States, a place where people actually know each other, have something in common, maybe have ancestors in the same graveyard, go to the same church, go to the same bar. People always say of Wisconsin, people said to me tonight, my town had 5 bars and 6 churches, or 6 bars and 5 churches, whatever the bar-church ratio is something that people joke about, and it's very noticeable as you drive around the state. But from my perspective as an outsider, what I notice is not simply the number of bars versus churches, though I do hope churches win. It's the fact that each of those places, a bar and a church, is a place for people from the actual community to meet. It's a place for people to come together in a town. And that is what strikes me more than anything about the state when I drive through it, is how many places there are for people to meet. And what that tells you is you have social cohesion. And it is a product of your history, of the people who settled this state, is the truth. I mean, I notice it I always loved going to the Twin Cities. I no longer go there because they're disgusting. But I would always go there, Minneapolis and St. Paul, and I would always notice the difference between the cities, and the differences from an outsider's perspective were really the product of the people who lived there. So Minneapolis was, I'll just be blunt, my people, the Scandinavians, the Protestant Scandinavians, and St. Paul was much more the Irish Catholic and Catholic Germans. And Minneapolis always struck me at, very clean, famously clean, but also kind of sterile and atomized, like the Scandinavians. You know what I mean? They kind of want to drink alone, to be honest. My father, who's Swedish, would always say, the Scandinavians just sort of kill a bottle of vodka staring out the window with the sleet and feel morose. There's a lot of truth in that. Whereas the Irish and the Germans would get together and get boisterous. They drink the same amount, but I do think the Germans and the Irish did it in a much more healthy way. And then you drive into St. Paul and you really got the sense, they always say, oh, it's the working class city. That's not what I noticed. I noticed a city where there were actual neighborhoods. I noticed this in Milwaukee too. I spent a lot of time in Milwaukee this summer. I went twice. Everyone beats up in Milwaukee. I like Milwaukee. And every time I go there, I think there are still sort of neighborhoods here. You know, a lot of the city seems like any other city, but there are parts of the city where you're like, there's a pretty good chance people live within walking distance of their grandparents. Even now, I notice that. And it seems to me like that's the main thing worth preserving in our country, actually. Like that thing right there, the fact that you can live in a place and have some connection to the other people who live in that place, that's worth more than, you know, any amount of money you could make to live in the place where your grandparents are buried. That's really important, I think. That stills people's soul. That brings peace. That is truly, truly valuable. And that is under threat in a way that I don't think we even perceive. And it's by design. Because, of course, if you have totalitarian aims, if you want to have total control over your population, you have to break them apart from each other. You have to atomize them. And you begin with the family, of course, and you encourage attitudes about gender and work that make it impossible to have a nuclear family, and they've certainly done that for the last 60 years. That was the whole point of the program, was to break apart the family. It wasn't a liberation movement. Sorry. It was a movement about destruction, the destruction of the essential unit of any civilization, which is the family. And they've done a pretty good job of achieving that, in case you haven't noticed. Again, and they did it never in a straightforward way. It's all through passive aggression. You know, the right is aggressive, the left is passive aggressive. So if you make someone on the right angry, they're like, I've got an AR-15. If you make someone on the left angry, which is, you know, whatever you think of AR-15s, it's like pretty straightforward. Push me too far and I'll shoot you. Okay, got it, those are the rules. Obviously, I'm on that side. And I think that's the honorable side, actually, because it is straightforward and honest. It's direct. You know, here are the rules. Go ahead and break it. And you know what's gonna happen. Okay, you know, message received. The left operates in precisely the mirror image way. And, you know, you make them mad and they're like, oh, I think you need counseling. And we're gonna, you know, set you up with some, you know, heavy-set menopausal lady who's gonna lecture you about how your kids should be transgender. You know what I mean? You've really just internalized, you know, white supremacy, and we need to re-educate you. And I would argue that that's a much more insidious way to bring about totalitarianism. I'm much more comfortable with like people in military uniforms marching down the streets of my village and threatening me, because at least, you know, I can join the partisan movement and fight against them, and we know what we're up against. You know, it's the guy in the tight trousers and the leather boots. Like, that's the guy we have to kill to be free. No, I'm serious. Like, you would much prefer to have an invading army that calls itself an invading army rather than an invading army that calls itself refugees, which is what we now have. Where you've got, you know, 25 million people in your country and they don't seem to be working. They're all being paid with your money to do what exactly? What is that? And most of them are young men. And well, that's an invading army, actually. That's exactly what that is, and that's why they're here. And I would just be much more comfortable if they were in uniform with firearms, because at least the rest of us could coalesce in opposition to them. But instead, we're lulled to sleep by the promise that, no, this is compassion. No, of course it's not compassion. It's an attack. It's an invasion on our country. And its aim is to destroy our country and to destroy its communities. And they're very sort of intent on this. And I would just say this, about not to be too dark, but as I drive through the state, which I do sincerely love, I'm not just saying that, and you know I'm not saying because I come back multiple times a year. I mean, the fact that you tie your boats up next to each other on your lakes, I just find that the coolest thing I've ever seen. And there is the question, like, where's everyone peeing? I do always think that. No one ever, no, I once asked someone, they're like, you know, I don't want to think about it. So there's that, you know, and everyone's drunk. Does anyone drown? Not really, which is also kind of amazing. But the fact that people in Wisconsin want to do that, it's hot. Let's tie our boats up together. That's what I noticed, together. I just think it's beautiful. That's actual community. I mean, it's boisterous and loud and, you know what I mean? There's like, how many times can you play the same Kid Rock song? You know, a lot. But there's something about that just strikes me as wonderful. I could drive through towns in Wisconsin in July for the rest of my life and look at happy people on pontoon boats getting loaded. Oh, it's so great. No, I mean it. I mean it. That's worth defending. That is worth defending. And I'm sorry that I'm using the phrase social cohesion because it's kind of a sterile sociology type phrase. It's the language of the humanities. You know, it's academics studying human behavior, and so it makes it sounds very abstract. But what it really is love. That's actually what that is. That's love. It's love of people for each other, the pure animal joy of being with other people, which is the greatest joy in life. In fact, it's the only real joy. You know, joy does not, I'm sorry, it doesn't come from making money. You know, I've been at both ends of that. I've had to sell my house and then I've made a lot of money and, you know, I've sort of seen it all. And many in this room know the feeling, and like making tons of money, being out of debt is good, I'll say that. But beyond that, it doesn't make you happy at all, actually. It just reduces the pain of being in debt, which is painful and bad. But beyond that, it is not a source of joy. The only source of joy, this is obvious to normal people, is being with each other. You know, sitting at a table with people you love. What did Jesus do on his last night on earth? He ate dinner with his friends. It tells you that's the highest expression of our love for each other, is being together and enjoying each other. And I just see that all throughout your state, even in your cities that people make fun of. And I'm not gonna compliment Madison because obviously it's a horrible place, but can I just say, because I cannot resist saying it, I know I'm gonna offend everyone in this room, if you're an outsider and you don't know how evil Madison is when you go there, you're like, wow, this place is beautiful. Because it is, actually, it is. I know it's bad, but it's charming. It is, sorry. I'm not gonna move there or anything, but like, I remember the first time I went there, I was like, all my life, people have made fun of Madison, Wisconsin. It's horrible, Madison, Wisconsin. And I thought it was gonna look like Gary, Indiana or something. But it doesn't. It's like, oh, I would live here. Of course, I'd be lynched. You know, I couldn't actually live there. But I can drive through in a baseball hat and sunglasses and feel, you know, like this is really pretty, because it is. But here's my point. As you assess the threat, and it's a real threat, it's not a political threat, it's a much deeper threat than a political threat. It's a threat to your culture. And I would say of this state specifically, and of the 50 states, I would say Wisconsin has maybe the most, or certainly one of the top 5 most distinct cultures. It's not like Illinois. It's not like Michigan. It's just not. I don't even know if you're aware of this, but when you come here, it's like, oh wow, this is Wisconsin. And that is a great thing. Because Wisconsin, for whatever reason, I'm not even quite sure why, maybe because you have so many small towns, maybe that's part of it. Maybe you just have deep tradition. You've got families that have been here for a long, long time. Whatever it is, Wisconsin has remained in a way that so few other states have, Illinois and Michigan, for example. It has remained distinct. It is its own thing here. I can even hear the accent difference. Maybe I'm imagining it. I don't think I am. I think the Wisconsin accent is different from the Michigan accent. And that is worth preserving. There is a reason that increasingly, if you're my age, 55, and you remember going from state to state and feeling like, oh wow, this is really different. Like South Carolina is different from North Carolina, it's totally different from Georgia, and it bears no resemblance to Florida. You know, and by the way, Florida and Colorado are like different countries, and California is a completely different thing. Now you drive around the country and it's just, you know, everything is Wendy's and Jiffy Lube. And some kind of sad residential hotel owned by some giant chain. Everything's owned by a chain. Nothing is local. Everything is national. Everything is Amazon and Walmart and some giant $1 trillion company. And the effect, I think it's not just about maximizing profits or efficiency. I think the point is to homogenize, to make everything the same, to erase distinctions. And when you, I beg your pardon, I'm choking out of emotion thinking about Jiffy Lube. There's nothing against changing your oil. I'm like totally for that. The point is, when you erase differences, what are you erasing? You're erasing culture, actually. And if you have a culture, and if you have actual communities, those are worth defending. And the point of immigration is to destroy all that. That is the point. Everyone says, oh, the point is new voters. Well, of course the point is new voters, obviously. And the Biden administration has found a way to let people in illegally and then immediately let them vote. In some cases, legally. It's not legal, it's all illegal, it's all a crime. I mean, I don't care how they paper over the crime with some bureaucratic document. It's a crime, you're committing a crime, you're destroying democracy. But the intent actually, the plan actually is deeper than that. It's to destroy the cultures and the communities of the people of this country by adding new people with whom the people who already live here have nothing in common. Now, let me just say, they shut down this debate completely. No one says anything like this because they don't want to be accused of hating immigrants. So let me just say, because it's true, not only do I not hate immigrants, I really like immigrants. My best friend is an immigrant. I'm totally for immigrants. I've met very few I don't like. I've even interviewed criminal immigrants who had like things I liked. You know, takes a lot of huevos to ride a train all the way through Mexico up here. I respect that. I respect the courage that takes. I respect the gumption, the bravery that takes. There's a lot about immigrants I really like, okay? That's not the point. The point is not whether the people coming here are good people. Well, they've sent, tens of thousands of murderers and rapists, as you probably know. But even if they hadn't, even if every person in the 25 million allowed into the country in the last several years, even if every one of them was like a sterling person who was destined to win a Nobel Prize for some scientific innovation, it would still be an act of violence against America and our culture because it's too many people. It's too many people. The economic effects of this are obvious. Housing prices go off the charts. In the debate the other night, I laughed out loud, actually, something I've never done during a debate. When Tim Walz is like, Vance is like, well, putting tens of millions of new people in your country spikes housing prices. And Walz is like, do you have a study to confirm that? You freaking moron. What? Okay. You have a limited supply of something and all of a sudden demand triples. Does the price rise or not? I'm not an economist. I'm not Paul Krugman, okay? I didn't win the Nobel Prize for economics. These people are so stupid. But I think that's called supply and demand, and I think it's an iron law that can't be changed, much like gravity and photosynthesis. Have you heard of it, supply and demand? That's why sand is cheap and diamonds are expensive. Do you understand the concept? No. Do you have a study to back that up? No. Yeah, okay. Freaking moron. Anyway, they sat there and then the moderator's like, can we fact check this? Do we have a study on this? Actually, I think the Federal Reserve Bank recently commissioned a study on it. I need the Fed to tell me that 25 million new people into my country is going to increase the price of housing stock? I think I knew that. So there's that. There's the effect on community hospitals, which have totally been destroyed. Have you been to an emergency room recently? Don't go. You can't get service. The hospital you pay for, you can't use because it's crowded with people. Maybe they're all great people. It doesn't matter. Too many people. So there's that, and there's the crime problem. And, they're always telling us illegal immigrants don't commit crime at a higher rate than native born. Well, first of all, any crime is too much crime. And someone who broke our law to get here in the first place has absolutely no right to commit any crime. You shouldn't be jaywalking, buddy. You're lucky to be here. By the way, we're paying for everything for you. It's outrageous, but actually the jails in Venezuela were emptied as they were in Cuba in 1980 during Mariel, of course, because government's like, oh wait, open border? Here, take people we don't want. So actually there is a huge cost to American citizens measured in lives, and a lot of people have been murdered, including in this state, by illegal aliens. So, Republicans are talking about that to some extent, not the ones in Washington, who have made this possible, by the way, for some reason, really a sick group in the leadership of the Republican Party in Washington. I don't know what their motive is. I don't know what Mitch McConnell is seeking to accomplish other than the total destruction of the United States. It's true. It's true. Mitch McConnell is completely in favor of open borders. Why is that? I can't even begin to guess. Yeah, maybe but he's like 83. He doesn't care about getting rich. It's deeper than that. He's already rich because of his wife's ties to the Chinese Communist government. So it's all a pretty wholesome scene in DC. I don't know if you've been recently. It's totally cool. No problem at all. I think Diddy spent quite a bit of time in Washington, DC. Are you applauding Diddy? Well, I don't even know who Diddy was a month ago. People talk about Diddy. I'm like, who's Diddy? What's his first name? Puff or something? Anyway, whatever. The point is, there are all these obvious effects of mass immigration, but the one that nobody ever mentions is the most important and long-lasting effect, which is the addition of millions of new people that you have nothing in common with from a completely different culture will destroy your communities. And that's the most important thing. That can be fixed. No election's gonna fix that. No hiring of 1 million new cops is gonna fix that. all of a sudden people aren't gonna be meeting at the churches and the bars. Not because the new people are bad people, but because they're different people and you have nothing in common with them. And I don't know how we've been intimidated into not saying that. Somehow we have. You're like a racist if you think that. Well, first of all, I'm not a racist. But I don't care what you call me. That's true. And by the way, in case you're looking for an academic study to support what's very obvious, there's been quite a few of them, including most famously by a Harvard professor wrote a book called Bowling Alone on this exact topic, and he discovered what you already knew, which is when people have nothing in common, there are no civic institutions. The amount of diversity, quote, diversity in your community, they don't want real diversity, by the way, like diversity of opinions, they hate that. But diversity of people from different cultures, all of a sudden, like, no one gives to charity anymore, et cetera, et cetera. People are not meeting in bars. They're not having cookouts on the church lawn. They're not doing raffles, bingo dies, like all the things that make an actual community, all the dumb little traditions, Halloween, all the things that we took for granted. And some of them were kind of stupid. Like, what is Halloween? I don't know. My wife is always mad about Halloween. She's a really sincere Christian. I think it's creepy. And I'm like, yeah, it is. Of course it's creepy. Are you kidding? Ghost costumes? Yeah, it's creepy. But it's also like American. And I'll take a little bit of creepiness in exchange for something that unites the whole country in a common tradition that we all grew up with. And yeah, they're probably a razor and an apple once in a while, but I don't know, I'll take the risk. Because it's Halloween, it's a thing that we do, and we do it together, and we do it every year on October 31st, and it's kind of cool. And who knows where it came from, and I'm sure it has some sort of dark spiritual quality to it, but when you live in a world where everything is pornography, like that's the least creepy thing that's happening, actually. But the point is, it was part of our culture. In fact, if you add up enough of those dumb little rituals, tying the boats together, going to the bar in your town with 300 people or whatever, that's what a culture is. A culture is common traditions, common history, a common unspoken understanding of what we all have in common, and begins with a common language. And they're making a concerted, explicit attempt to destroy that. I saw a video the other day of Tim Walz, speaking of creepy, whoa. If that guy was a football coach at my kid's school, they'd be going somewhere else, okay? Not invited to babysit at my house. But I saw a video of him from 2 years ago, just repeating the normal slogans and talking points that they're all required to repeat. You know, it's always the dumbest things, the most untrue things that you're required to say over and over again because they are untrue. And so it's only through forced repetition that you can accept them, or you don't question them, right? Climate change. You know, there's a scientific consensus that people are causing climate change. No, there's not. What? We had glaciers 10,000 years ago. The climate has dramatically changed throughout all history since the cooling of the earth. Did my Suburban do that? Shut up, there's a consensus. But they just keep repeating these slogans, and ultimately you don't even think about their substance, you just accept them at face value. That's the whole point. So he was repeating the dumbest of all, which is diversity is our strength. Really? Is it really our strength? Shut up, racist. Well, I'm not racist, so there. But let's consider the idea. The less we have in common, the stronger we are? Is that true in your marriage? If you couldn't speak the same language as your wife, if you practiced separate religions, if you grew up in different countries, if you had nothing in common, would you have a stronger marriage? Of course not. You'd have a failed marriage. Is that true in your office? The less your employees have in common, the better they work together? What are you even talking about? No, unity is our strength. Unity. It doesn't mean you have to be the same color or from the same country, but it means you have to have something in common or else you can't hang together. That's just a fact. And I don't care how inconvenient a fact is, it's still true. And so he was going on about this because he is, in addition to everything else, stupid. And stupid in the sense that all of our leaders are stupid. Like they just say things they don't understand, they haven't thought through, they don't really mean it, and to the extent they mean it, they don't understand why they mean it. They're children, okay? We're at war with Russia, why? How's that gonna end? Oh, shut up. You work for Putin, racist. Okay, got it. Anyway, yeah, they're dumb. You would never hire them. They can't get jobs. That's why they've created this whole system where useless people get rich and famous. It's called the US economy. But anyway, here's the point. He was saying, it's so beautiful. I go to these little towns in Minnesota, and there's one, this particularly diverse and wonderful town, where at the school, 50 different languages are spoken, and it's just wonderful. And I thought, wonderful in what sense? Wonderful if you are a translator, maybe. But is it wonderful for the kids? I'm not attacking any of the kids at all. I love kids. I don't care where they're from or what they look like. I like kids. A lot more than Tim Walz likes kids, Mr. Infanticide, but whatever, that's a whole separate thing. And I'm like, how do you learn anything? 50 different languages doesn't bring you together, it divides you, actually, because you can't understand anybody. And the only way to form relationships with people is by talking to people. And if they don't even have the ability to talk to each other, they can't have relationships. They can't love each other, and they can't have a community. So what you're actually doing is dividing people. You're dividing people by putting people with nothing in common in close proximity to one another. And by doing that, you're destroying their communities. And you're doing that on purpose. It's exactly the reason you're putting public housing in residential neighborhoods, which they are doing. And they're calling it affordable housing, or they're using climate change to justify it. But no, it has nothing to do with climate change or justice of any kind. They're putting housing projects in residential neighborhoods. And that's never one time in history. It's been tried many times since urban renewal. For the last 60 years, it's been tried. And not one time has that ever happened where it didn't destroy the community. Period. Now, you can blame the people whose communities were destroyed. Oh, white flight, they moved away. Okay. Why'd they move away? I mean, whatever. You can call people's motives into question. You can attack them. You can blame, rural people for the country's problems. Yeah, they're the problem. We're on the brink of nuclear war because rural people did it. Our economy's on the brink because rural people. Oh, shut up. You can blame people all you want, but it's still just true. You destroy communities when you inorganically move populations around. When you don't let people live where they want to live and live the way they want to live and have their own dumb little rituals. When you decide you know better and everyone has to live a certain way, when you homogenize things, you destroy people's communities and you destroy their lives. You destroy their lives. They can't raise their kids in the town where their parents are buried. There's no amount of money that can compensate for that. And in Washington, where I spent my life, they'll tell you, well, why don't you just move? There's no opportunity in your town. The mill closed. Maybe I don't want to move. Maybe I went to high school here. Maybe my parents are buried here. Maybe my family's been here for 150 years. Maybe I just like it. Maybe you should shut up and go back to your stupid Aspen Institute or wherever you're from. You know what I mean? Go give another AEI lecture. These are, I'm sorry. I'm out of control. Please don't give money to AEI. Really the worst people in the world. Not the worst, the very worst, I wanted to say. But the point is, they will, and I mean that, and I only know that because I know them so very well because I lived next to them for only 40 years, not a big deal. But they would blithely just say, well, why don't they just move? Well, why don't you move, actually? Why don't we send 15,000 Haitians to your neighborhood and then call you racist when you don't like it? Or 50,000 Belgians. It doesn't matter. People who aren't from where you're from into your community. How about we do that in Martha's Vineyard, and then we'll do it in Bethesda. You know what I mean? Then we'll do it in Aspen, and then we'll try it in Jackson Hole. Why don't we do that? Why don't we do it in Bel Air, California? No, I'm serious. Why don't we do it in Lincoln, Massachusetts, and every one of the richest suburbs of Boston? We're just gonna move 50,000 Haitians into every one of those towns, and if you don't like it, if you dare to move, we're gonna call you racist on the front page of the New York Times. Why don't we try that? And why don't we do it at gunpoint, actually? And of course, we're not gonna do that because the people who live in those towns are doing it to you. And it's an act of hostility. And they've cowed the rest of us into silence with moral blackmail. Well, they live in places like, by the way, I've spent a lot of time in all of the towns I just mentioned, so I know exactly what they're like. And they don't have high density housing or whatever the hell they're calling it, public housing, projects. They don't have any of that. And they don't have mass immigration at all because they don't want it. And they're imposing on the rest of the country, and they're gonna impose it on this state big time. And I'm sure they're doing it now. I'm just guessing, but I just know what they're like. And this is the kind of place they don't like because you tie your boats together in the summertime, and the sight of that drives them insane because you're loyal to your neighbors to a greater extent than you're loyal to them. So they must destroy that loyalty by diluting your communities and destroying them. So I will stop there and just say, I hope every person who lives in this state that it's my second favorite state. I'm not gonna tell you my first favorite. I live there. but this is my second favorite state, and that's a high compliment, okay? It's not just that you're beating New Jersey. It's that you're beating Montana, just to be honest. Not many states get to beat Montana, and I think you've crushed them because you got fewer Californians. The problem with being in an incredibly cool place is that often the people who live there are so happy that they take it for granted. The last thing I'll say, I was talking backstage, and I don't mean this in a creepy way, in a very non-creepy way, but I was saying to someone backstage, I was like, I just like the women in Wisconsin. I've always liked them. And he's like, why? Are they so hot? I was like, I don't know. They're happy. And I'm married to a happy woman, and I've always thought that happiness is the root of female beauty. There's nothing prettier than a happy woman. I don't even know what a happy woman looks like. I just like them. You know what I mean? I always say to my wife, we've been married so long, I don't even know what you look like. I think you're hot. And the reason I think that is because she's happy. Midwestern person from a neighboring state, the one that stole the top of your state. And, but I just noticed that about people in Wisconsin. They're just happy. They don't seem riddled with anxiety at all. I mean, maybe in Madison they do, or certain wards in Milwaukee they do, but in general they don't. You know what I mean? Find an unhappy person in, I don't know, Sheboygan or Neenah. There are not too many. And so maybe if you live in a place like that, you can't even conceive of the idea that it could change and that people from outside look at your happiness and are incited by it and angered by it and want to change it and want to destroy it. But I'm just telling you, and I don't mean to wreck your night, they are angered by it and they do want to change it. And you should fight like animals, like a cornered wombat. You ever try to get a cat in a box? Okay? Have you ever tried to get a cat in a box? Like to go to get an airplane? I don't admit ever having owned a cat, but I have seen that, I'll just say. It's total resistance. Total resistance. And that should be your posture as they try to destroy your communities with immigration and high density housing. And I mean it. You should not be ashamed. No, I grew up in the state. We have a wonderful thing going here. You're not gonna wreck it. Bare your teeth, because if you don't, they will wreck it. Thank you.
So I think you've answered all my questions. So
I don't remember what I said, but it was heartfelt.
It was. Today is an anniversary, a very special anniversary for us here in Wisconsin. So we're going to start out there because lawfare still continues in our country. It's horrible what happens to people who want to step forward and do really good things for their country or their state. And they find themselves first being intimidated, then being harassed and jailed and threatened, gagged. So 11 years today, at the crack of dawn, some folks, some really good friends of mine who are in this audience, had the beating of their door, lights, guns ablazing, coming in their house, ransacking all of their personal papers. They were gagged. They couldn't tell anybody that is what happened. All their family were terrorized for years before their items were returned to them. It still continues. So we have a very onerous government that tries to control us when we want to talk about our freedoms. So what do you say to people like that? I know President Trump has been experiencing that. We've seen Roger Stone. There's a lot of people that have been attacked. We've got lawyers that try to defend us that are also attacked. Also, some of those lawyers are in this room. So how do we get government pushed back in the proper place so that our freedoms are not taken away from us?
I remember that so vividly, what you're talking about, and what happened during the Walker administration. One of those things where I worked for a big company, TV company then, and it was one of those stories where you're like, what is this? You know, when you live in DC, things happen in the States, and you think to yourself, like, there's clearly something I'm missing. Like what happened in the last presidential election in Green Bay, for example. I was like, that can't really be what happened. I mean, that was totally fraudulent. Sorry, you know this. And the Walker thing was the first time I remember thinking, am I missing part of this? Is this just like fascism? It can't really be, it's Wisconsin. But it really was. And subsequently, I've had a number of friends go to prison. I have a friend in prison right now, Steve Bannon, for no reason, actually. And I could bore you with how it was unjust, but it is purely political. What would I say? Well, I have a lot of thoughts. I'll just make them super quick. One, the American Civil Liberties Union for 100 years, really from the First World War up until the Trump administration, was a left-wing organization, but it was a civil liberties organization. It was. And it would take cases defending Americans against violations of the Bill of Rights, and including right-wingers, because it had principle. Now it has no principle at all. It's just another organ on the left pushing the trans agenda. People who believe in the Bill of Rights, whether they're right, left, or center, it's mostly right, but it's not all, at all. Bobby Kennedy, is not or wasn't a right-winger. I don't know what he is now exactly. Well, he's a Trump surrogate now. There are elements of the left, the traditional left, who could make common cause. There was a huge rally on Sunday in Washington to illustrate this point: traditional left, traditional right, together to defend the country against totalitarianism. They need to form a replacement to the ACLU, a nonprofit where people whose civil liberties are being abridged, who are facing prison for saying their political views out loud, can go for legal representation. And the big firms, won't take these cases. As you know, the lawyers in the room know this well. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is much more personal. You cannot abide by a gag order. It's unconstitutional. They can't tell you can't talk. You have a First Amendment right to say your opinion, period. And don't abide by it. And if you need to go into hiding and continue to speak on X, which is really the last at-scale free meaning open media platform we have in the world, you should do that. You should never abide by a gag order. And I've had a number of friends facing prison who I've said this to, and they're like, well, you don't know what it's like to face prison. That's true. I'm sure I will if Kamala wins. But it's a matter of principle. It's a matter of what kind of country do you want your children and grandchildren to live in? They cannot tell you can't give your political opinions, period, under any circumstances. And there's a judge in Washington called Amy Berman Jackson, full fascist, a Democratic partisan, but a totalitarian, who told Roger Stone that he couldn't explain what the government was doing to him because it would somehow bias the jury pool. Whereas, of course, federal prosecutors leaked his text messages to the New York Times. This happened to me. My text messages went up at the New York Times, not to whine. But they're liars. They're not upholding a principle. They're taking away your God-given right, a right that you were born with, that the U.S. government exists to protect. The government did not grant you that right. It's inherent. You were born with it. That's what our founding documents say, and that's just true. Those are human rights. And first among them is the right to say what you think is true, period. And if anyone tries to take it away from you, you have to be willing to go to jail to uphold that right. That's just a fact. And by the way, if you're in that situation, you've already entered into the political arena, you have to be cognizant of the risks. If you can't handle it, don't enter. I'm sorry to be mean. I'm being honest. Don't get involved if you're not willing to stand on principle to the end. You don't have to hurt anybody else, and you shouldn't. If you're a Christian, as I am, you should not hurt other people, period. But you have to be willing to be hurt if you're going to save the country. And the gag order stuff is just a really clear line. They have no right to do that. And if you allow them to do it, you're giving them the right to do it. You're establishing a precedent that your children are going to have to live with that will destroy this country. If the government can tell you you're not allowed to tell other people what the government is doing to you illegally, then we're done. Then we're just East Germany. So if you need to, hide out at a friend's house and tweet from your basement about what they're doing, do that. And enough people do that, this will end. But until they do that, it will continue. So the burden is on us to be brave. That's my opinion.
Again, it's the isolation that they want, right?
Oh, of course.
To keep you in fear.
I just spent the month of September on the road. We went to 16 different cities, a speaking tour. And the main reason I did it, really the reason I did it, was I wanted to be in a room full of 10,000 people who believe in human freedom. I do. I just wanted that. And I wanted everyone else in the room to look around and be like, oh, I'm not crazy. There are other people here who want to live a totally normal life, who don't want to bring America back to the antebellum era. You want to bring it back to 1985. It was not that long ago. It was a free country. I lived here in 1985. I remember. I was dating the same girl in 1985. It was a free country. And it's not too much to ask to bring it back to 1985. That's not the Stone Ages. I don't care what they say. Oh, you're a Neanderthal. Really? 1985? I don't think so. We had way less racial tension in 1985 than we have now. You've brought it back to the Stone Ages, and you blamed us for it, as usual. No, people need to be willing to say, I was born in a free country, and I will do whatever it takes, short of violence. I'm not going to commit violence. I will be the victim of violence if that's what it takes. I will be, and I mean it. That's the only way it changes. If people are deadly serious about it, you cannot eliminate the Bill of Rights. I just won't stand for it. And unfortunately, we failed the test shamefully during COVID. We, meaning we failed. I failed. I mean, I didn't go along with it. I never wore a mask or took their stupid shot, obviously. I didn't socially distance, obviously. But I should have been way more aggressive than I was. I should have gone on TV every night and said, totally disobey this. Totally what, are you even, what? They're telling you they're gonna arrest you if you have a public protest? Go have the public protest and be arrested. Fill their jails. Fill their jails with dissidents, which is what you are. And I should have joined them myself. And I didn't, because I was living on my weird little island like, I don't want to deal with any of this stuff. You know what I mean? Have fun in your collapsing country. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm embarrassed. I spoke up more than most people, but I didn't speak up enough. None of us did. And I just pray that if that happens again, they're like, oh, really, for your own safety, because we're now at war with Russia or we're at war with Iran. They're trying to start both those wars right now to strip our civil liberties from us, not because they care about those countries. It's about what they want to do to us. We're at war now. You're not allowed to say what you think. Well, I'm going to say it anyway. And I hope that every person in this room and every person you know will do exactly the same. Because again, it's not about us. It's about our children and the kind of country that they live in. And if you let them continue, if they do a COVID again and we act like sheep again, we're done.
That's right. So in order to cope with all of that, I totally agree with you, obviously. In order to combat that and to protect our rights, and we have good people that run for office. And sometimes those good people don't stay good people, right, in office. And now we're fighting with our own people instead of trying to save the country against fascism, socialism, but we're fighting our own people. What do you say to get our representative government back?
Just have zero tolerance for that nonsense. I mean, and let me be clear about what the nonsense is in the Republican Party. It's their foreign policy. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. We don't have the money to help the people of Western North Carolina because we spent it on FEMA helping illegal aliens. We don't have the money somehow to defend our southern border because we're so concerned about Ukraine and Israel. Now, I'm not against Ukraine or Israel. I'm for America. Let's just be really clear. I don't know any Republican office holders who would say that. Because that's like bad or something? What? You represent our country. It's not against another country. I mean, I sincerely don't have any problem with, I've been almost every country in the world. I like them all, actually. I just like other countries. I like other cultures, but they're not mine. I'm American. My family's been here for hundreds of years. I hope that my descendants will be here hundreds more. Your job as our leader is to protect our country and its interests. And if you have loyalty to another country, you're evil and you've disqualified yourself for leadership, period. And we don't say that enough. And I saw a Republican congressman the other night who I like. And he's like, well, really Trump is, Iran is trying to assassinate Trump. And I'm like, you're a freaking liar, dude. That's not true. Who's trying to assassinate Trump? Leftists. The last guy to assassinate Trump was a neocon, tried to shoot him on a golf course. The guy actually went to Ukraine to volunteer. He has the same politics as Dick Cheney. He's not Iranian. He's from Ohio or something. What? The threat is domestic. It's right in our face. You're telling me it's Iran? You're a freaking liar. Well, the briefers, they're like, so the CIA, which killed Kennedy, is now a trusted source of information for you? You're a liar. And I said this right to his face, and I like the guy, but he didn't like that at all. I think he hated me. I sat in front of one of his staffers. I was like, you tell every other country, go fight your own freaking wars, and good luck. But we're being invaded right now by 25 million people, and you've done nothing. I said that to the governor of Texas, who's like a perfectly nice guy. I was at a party with him at someone's house. I made a total scene, and he's like, wow, you're criticizing me. Yeah, I'm good. Don't you have a National Guard, tough guy? This was 3 years ago. Why aren't they on the border right now? Well, it's very complicated. Really, it's complicated. How complicated is it? You're in bed with your wife, and all of a sudden there's a home invasion. And you're like, I'm not gonna check the laws on whether I can defend you with deadly force. She'll never sleep with you again, for one thing, because she now knows that you don't care about her. I don't need to check the laws. It's my wife. She's being threatened. I love my wife. More than anything, my duty is to my wife. If you're the leader of a state, where's your duty? To your state. If you're the leader of a country, where's your duty? To the country. If you love the people you lead, you will do what it takes to protect them. And if you don't, you won't. It's that simple. They don't love us. It couldn't be clearer. And the Republicans in Washington, with some exceptions, don't love us as much as they love Ukraine. Period. And that's not just a flaw, it's disqualifying, it's disgusting. And if you push them on it, this guy says to me, well, you know, what we really need to do is get to the bottom of Russiagate. Okay, well, they always do the same thing. They throw you I'll just say cable news, red meat, like Russiagate, I got it. I know what that was about. I wanna know what my government is doing to me. Like, you should declassify, there are over 1 billion classified federal documents. I'm a shareholder in the government. I was born here. I own that government. So do all of you. And so for you to tell me I don't have a right to know what my government is doing with my money in my name, you can't represent me. And if your loyalty is to some other country, and I know by how much money you spend, then you can't represent me. And we give Republican leaders a pass, and they're like, oh, it's foreign policy, it's kind of out of your depth. These are people who don't speak the languages in the countries they're sending money to, who've never been there, don't know anything about the country, they don't know anything. They're children, and they run around strutting out like they're Henry Kissinger or something. It's very complicated in the Donbass. Oh, shut up. You're like some finance guy from Nashville. You don't know anything, okay? But here's what I know as an American citizen. Your duty is to me. It doesn't mean I hate the people of Ukraine. I feel sorry for the people of Ukraine, actually. I feel sorry for all kinds of different countries and peoples. But they're not Americans. And if you really care about them, how about you sell your house and send them the money? But you're not allowed as a leader of my country to use tax dollars to help other militaries with their borders while our border is open and our people are dying as a result. So yeah, we have a huge problem and it's all in foreign policy. And if you ask them about it, they'll throw you something about, they'll try and push all your erogenous zones to make you feel like they're on your side. Ask them about foreign policy. How much are we sending to these countries? And what are we getting in return for it? Oh, it's very complicated. NATO. I was at the NATO summit. That's why, by the way, last thing I'll say, why have all these Republicans publicly announced that they're voting for Kamala Harris? If you told me 10 years ago that Bill Kristol, who I spent 5.5 years working for, Dick Cheney, who I knew, his creepy little daughter, who I knew very well, Mike Pence, all these people, they're all voting for Kamala Harris. The Bushes, all voting for Kamala Harris. George W. Bush, Jeb Bush, voting for Kamala Harris. How did that happen? But they are, that's the problem. They just don't care about the country. They're mad that Trump might have one fewer war over the next 4 years. And that's it's a clarifying moment. And I think this very often. I'm really grateful for how clear things are now. It's really obvious who's on whose side. And all I care about is preserving the country that I grew up in for my kids. That's not too much to ask. I don't want it to change radically. I don't want it to become much worse. Economic cycles come and go, but a culture, a people, that's permanent. That's permanent. I'd do 10 years of recession. I'd sell my house in exchange for not having a society completely transformed by foreigners. Okay, that's the truth. I mean it. And there's no Republican who will say that. It's all about GDP and growth and whatever. It's like, what you're saying bears no resemblance to what I want, which is a stable, happy country. That's what I want, a stable, happy country. And I lived in one, I know it's possible. You destabilized it with your stupid wars. And last thing I'll say, now I'm totally out of control, but these people should all have to answer for their foreign policy of the last 20 years. I covered that stuff. I was on the first plane out of DC to the Middle East after September 11th. So I'm not an expert, I never pretended to be one, but I've been to all their wars, I've watched all this stuff, and I don't understand how the people who planned all that are still making the decisions, and no one's ever had to apologize. No one ever asks John Bolton Like, why haven't you apologized? You said we were gonna get one thing, we didn't get it. We spent trillions of dollars. We killed almost all the Christians in Iraq. I am Christian, so I think it's fair to ask, like, what was that about? And you never apologized. If my kids get a B in English class, they have to apologize. Because that's the difference between a human being and a sociopath. A human being grows by admitting fault. It's called repentance. And it's absolutely essential. There's no sin that I personally will not forgive. I mean it. And there's no sin that I would not personally forgive in another person if that person was contrite and asked for forgiveness, because that's what my religion demands. But if you're not even forced to apologize or express contrition, and instead you continue to rule my country, misrule it, we have a system that's so far out of whack that I'm surprised we haven't had some kind of revolution, because it's crazy.
The Tea Party was one of the revolutions that
Yeah, it's like the Tea Party, January 6th, like the most normal people in the country. What was like, not one person on January 6th was carrying a firearm. What were they carrying? Pocket constitutions. They're carrying pocket constitutions. So like, and they went to jail, like some 65-year-old diabetic grandmother. Really, that's an insurrection? No, it's not. They were people who, some of them did rowdy things that I'm opposed to. I hate vandalism, okay? But the overwhelming majority of them wanted to preserve the system. That's why they were mad. They weren't trying to overthrow it. They're trying to preserve it. And they watched our system in the process of being overthrown, which it has been. And they're the villains? I don't think you're the villain, actually. If you want to preserve the greatest country in the world in some recognizable way, you're not the bad guy. You're not the radical. I'm often called radical. I'm the least radical person you've ever met. I'm like the most moderate person. I just want things to be, my parents got divorced. I don't like change. I don't. I mean it. I'm not a radical. I'm just the opposite. Like, it was that way last year. Let's keep it that way. I kind of like that. I go to the restaurant, I know the same thing. I'm not a revolutionary. I hate revolutionaries. Revolutions never make things better. They always just wreck stuff. I hate wrecking stuff. It took someone a long time to build that. It took you 2 minutes to wreck it. You're the villain. And so this grandmother who's like, no, the Constitution says this. She's the radical? No, you're the radical, Kamala Harris. You hate the people of this country. You hate the way things have been done. You despise our history. You despise the people who created this country. You're a scary Bolshevik radical. We're not. We tie our boats together.
She is, however, the one that talks about joy.
The girl who kissed her husband with a mask on is talking about joy? The whole point of kissing is lip on lip. I don't want to work blue here. I don't know if there are kids in the audience. If you're kissing your spouse with a mask on, you're a freak who knows nothing about joy. Wearing some mouth condom, it's disgusting. Joy. When was the last time you experienced it, honey? I think it's been a while. Not since you dated Montel Williams have you felt joy. Sorry, Sarah.
Woo! That's awesome. So we do want
joy. She's the most afraid person I've ever seen. I can't hate her because I feel bad for her. When that debate with Trump, which I hated, like most people who are going to vote for Trump, like I didn't like the debate, I'll be honest. But the first 30 seconds on her face, go back and look at the tape, she's like, oh my gosh, how did I get here? Like I've never done anything in my life at all. No one has voted for me. And yet I'm the presidential candidate of the Democratic Party. She's like terrified. And I just saw that and I was like, as someone who actually likes women, unlike her, how does she treat her female staff? Can you imagine? But we know because she got the highest turnover in Washington, but I felt bad for her. I was like, this is affirmative action. This is what it looks like. It's same with Tim Walz. He has that job because he's a white guy. They're like, oh, we need a white guy. And he's an affirmative action hire also. And you saw how afraid he was. He's like, it's not meritocratic at all. That guy did not earn that job. They're like, oh, sort of sexually non-threatening beta male, white guy, over 60 from the Midwest. You. Okay. And like all affirmative action hires, he's like, I have no idea what I'm doing here. Both of them. Anyway, sorry.
But he kept staring like he was trying to understand.
Because he's totally freaked out. He's like, I can't believe I'm here. will they ever find out my terrible secrets? Which he clearly has. I mean, whoa. I don't know what they are, by the way, but he has terrible secrets. Like, if anybody I've ever seen in public life has terrible secrets, it's Tim Walz. Like, he's just waiting till they find out. Like, the Daily Mail gets a hold of whatever document.
That's why he keeps lying.
Oh, totally.
Because
you can
he doesn't
feel
want
it.
them to find the truth.
I don't know what it is, but that guy, whoa. Whoa. I don't want to be in the polygraph when he takes it. You know, I don't want to know.
So we've talked about wanting to go back. We don't like change. We want to go back to 1985, I think I heard you say.
That seems like a fair request.
So we have a lot of young people. I've talked to you about my grandson earlier.
Yes.
And all of his friends. I use them as my focus group. They want to start their businesses now. They're in their early 20s. One of them wants to be a farmer. One wants to be a diesel mechanic. One wants to operate a machine shop. They know that what their government is telling them right now about how to start those businesses with all of the subsidies and Kamala Harris's plans for startups. What do we say to them to make them know that if someday, like I remember going from Jimmy Carter days to Ronald Reagan days, and life changed. Life got a lot better. How do we talk to our young folks and have them understand that it will get better?
I think it will get better, but I think it's going to be very different. So the American culture and economy have allowed us for at least 100 years, really since the industrialization of the country, to have the system where middle-class families raise kids and then they send the kids off into the world and the kids move to some faraway place. Cheap air travel has accelerated this. And all of us have kind of grown up in this world where it's not weird to be from Sheboygan but have kids in Malibu or wherever, even Milwaukee, or, you know, we send our kids out. And there's no expectation that families stay physically close to each other or that they work together at all. And our economy has sustained that. Like I grew up in an affluent town, pretty affluent family, and at 22, or 14 actually, I left and went to boarding school, and then at 22 I got married, and it was like, you know, good luck, see you at Christmas. I'm not giving you any money or anything, you know what I mean? But that was America. I mean, I'm 55, like it was a different world, and it worked fine. Now I think people understand that there are so many hostile forces coming at us, and people feel this. I've talked to a lot of people in the last year about this, and they all feel the same instinct, like I want my team close. Like maybe that model worked in the time and place in which it was popular, but we need a different model. You got to have people you love and trust near you. And is it crazy to hire your kids? It used to be kind of shameful to hire your kids. Oh, it was nepotism and like da-da-da. It's like, no. The model for all human history is you work with your family. It was only until the steam engine transformed everything that everyone lived together and worked together, and that like kind of worked for all recorded history. You know what I mean? So I think people feel this instinct, like I want the tribe around me, and you need your people around you. I really feel that strongly. I mean, I know at the top end, among rich people, I know a bunch of people who are just like, I'm building a compound, I don't care. Yeah. And not like even a Randy Weaver compound, not with the emphasis on firearms and guard towers, but just like we all live, which is not bad, by the way, but we all live near each other. I mean, like, why wouldn't you buy, 100 acres and everyone gets a house? Like, how much does that cost? I mean, literally, that's less expensive than buying a high-end condo in Miami. So why wouldn't you do that, right? And I'm sure people in this room have done it or know people who are doing that. That's an expression. Most people can't do that because it's expensive. Right. But it's an expression of the same instinct. Draw close to your people because hard times are coming. They clearly are coming. I mean, obviously they're coming. Everyone knows that. Follow your instincts on that. It doesn't need to be apocalypse. It doesn't need to be terrible. We're at the tail end of the longest sort of not just bull market, but sort of bull culture in history where I was born in 69, nothing's really happened since then. Like, I don't know, we won the Cold War and you know what I mean? Like 9/11, but nothing really bad has happened. Bad things are starting to happen. A lot more are gonna happen, obviously. We shouldn't start crying and run away or, dive into the Xanax pool or whatever. You don't need to freak out. You know what I mean? We'll be okay. People are not gonna be extinguished. And you can thrive. People were happy after the fall of Rome. The Roman Senate wasn't happy, but the Visigoths were happy. But truly, like, even in the midst of chaos, there has been peace in the family or in villages. It's like, no matter what happens, people will still be happy if they're sort of smart and aware and prayerful, and like, it's okay, actually, but you have to draw your people close. I really believe that. So if I were 22, I'd think about like the people I love. First of all, I get married immediately. You know, if you're in Wisconsin, there's like an overabundance of awesome girls to marry. So just marry one and have a bunch of pups. That's super important. Build your own army. I'm not joking even a tiny bit. And all the messages from on high, like what's the main public health message, the main social message of our leaders, the criminals in charge, is anti-fertility. Everything is about not having kids. Everything. The only right you have is not to have kids. It's to have an abortion. That's the only right you have. You don't have free speech, freedom of assembly, freedom to buy what you want. No. The only right is abortion. Okay, however you feel about abortion, it's like, why the emphasis on not having kids? All the messages are about not having kids. So on that basis alone, I'm like, if all the world's most evil people think I shouldn't have kids, I'm gonna have 10. I'm not even Mormon. I'm Protestant. And there's a reason they don't want you to have kids, because when you have kids, it becomes really obvious who you're most loyal to. Your kids. And maybe less Kamala Harris, who doesn't have any kids, not to be mean, but she doesn't. And so she's kind of the perfect, just like every European leader, none of them have kids. They don't care about the future, why would you? It's all about vacationing in St. Bart's or getting rich for the moment. There's no longitudinal thinking at all. And so I'd get married, have tons of kids, work with my family, pick a place. I think place is really important. We're too disconnected from place in America. I really noticed that. I've spent a lot of time in other countries, and people are really into the place. Like, this is the town, this is the place. I don't know, few Americans have ancestral homes, maybe in Wisconsin, but most places, there's no ancestral anything. Make that. This is my town, I'm staying here. And you can, by the way, thanks to technology. Right? I mean, it's a whole different way of thinking. But less get on a plane, more build your fortress at home.
I think COVID has taught us that, right?
Yes! That's such a great example.
Yeah.
That's what we learned. You know, everyone's like, oh, the tragedy of COVID and whatever. I mean, I'm in a room full of generally affluent family people. I bet the majority of people in this room really kind of enjoyed COVID. Maybe no one wants to admit it. But if you had a coherent family and you could stay at home, I don't want to gloat. I know a lot of people suffered and died during COVID, but I know a lot of people like, that's the greatest time I've ever had. All my kids came home.
Right.
I got to see the grandkids. Like, there's always an upside. Nothing is an unalloyed good or bad in the temporal world. Everything is a mixed blessing. And look at the bright side. Like, what did we learn from COVID? Well, I don't have to go into New York City. I mean, I never went to New York City again. And I worked for a company based in New York City. I was like, your company's disgusting, your city's disgusting, people are sleeping in ATM vestibules. I'm never going there again. And I never did. And talk about an upside.
And you're doing great.
I'm fine. I'm a lot happier, you know?
Right.
I mean, but we learned that. Like, you're not subject to all the rules. And I do think, I just said I hate change and I hate revolutions and shakeups and everything. I'm not in charge of history, unfortunately, so I can't control these things happen. But one upside to them is it does sort of, I think getting really sick does the same thing. Those of you who've recovered from serious illness, you know that like it is the moment where you're like, why am I doing it this way? Am I really helping the people around me? Am I doing something meaningful? Is there, I hate to use the word since Kamala's wrecked, but is there joy in this? Is this the right thing to do? Like, I've done it my whole life. Maybe I should stop doing it. And I think there was a lot of good that came out of COVID, a lot.
Yes, I do too, yeah. So we talked about a lot of things. I want to talk about how do we, because there's a lot of doers in this room. We want to do things. We want to change things, even though you don't like change. But we want to restore our country, right?
Yeah.
We've had a lot of people that have come before us that have fought for us to be here today. And we need to protect what they did. We need to do our part because we're here. So one of those ways is elections. Right? Elections, everybody says forever, this election is the most important election of my lifetime. That's true of all elections.
Yeah.
This is a moment, though, however, because of the invasion at the border, where there's a lot of uncertainty about what may happen. We've had some really bad things that people have thought were bad outcomes from previous elections. And there's a lot of people in this room that want to protect this election coming up and working. SAVE Act is one. that is being talked about in DC. It passed in the House, needs to pass in the Senate. Do you think that will happen? And then also in the state of Wisconsin in November, we have a constitutional amendment because we have a governor that won't sign a bill to protect our right to vote. So we're working very hard to try to protect only citizens voting. Do you think that we will be successful in those endeavors, knowing what has crossed our borders already?
I mean, I sure hope so. Of course, I think, again, it's a religious question. We're commanded to hope. It's not like a byproduct of a sunny day. It's like a duty. Faith, what, and love? It's like everyone focuses on the love, every wedding in the world. Faith, hope, and love. The greatest is love. Yeah, the greatest is love, but hope is also on the list. And it's something that you do, not something that just happens organically. You know, I have a dark Scandinavian soul. I have to make myself hope. You know what I mean? And I do. So I am always hopeful. As the specific act that you referred to that has died in the Senate, I happen to have dinner with one of my favorites. I don't like most senators. They're loathsome. But one I really love is Mike Lee from Utah, who's one of the only Republicans I've ever seen get better in the Senate and not drink the Kool-Aid. And he was just at my house for dinner 2 nights ago. And we were talking about this. And of course, it's the Republican leadership colluding with the Democratic leadership to kill it. And it's so frustrating. It's hard to believe it's happening. So I don't think we're gonna get that. I don't know what's gonna happen. I have a terrible record of predictions. I'm always surprised. I would just say 2 things. 1, have hope. And 2, remember that the outcome is never what you think it's gonna be, ever, good or bad. How many people do you know who've worked their entire lives to build a company, sold it to a PE firm, get ridiculously rich, in other words, succeed, reach the goal they were working toward for their entire lives, and get way less happy? About 99% of people to sell PE firms have that experience. I'm sure some of you have lived it. And that it's just one of a million different examples of often your victories are your defeats and your defeats are your victories. And we need to remember that. And that is, by the way, for those of you who care, a Christian principle as well. The first will be last. The meek shall inherit the earth. How do the meek inherit the earth? We don't even notice them. You know, they're off in the corner being meek. How do they get to be in charge? You know what I mean? It's like, what I think Jesus is describing is opposite day. It's always opposite day in the world. It's the opposite of what you thought was COVID. It's a perfect example. I spent a year like pulling my hair out. I was so mad. I was so mad about everything I was seeing in our country that I missed all the blessings right around me, which were my 4 children living in my house for the first time since they went to boarding school at 14. Like, why did we do that? I have no idea. But you see what I'm saying? And so what we should remember is that, again, what you think is victory is often defeat. What you fear is defeat is so often victory. Have you ever learned anything from winning? Have you ever learned anything useful on vacation? Ever? Do you even remember vacation after the first day? The answer is no. It's only through suffering, it's only through loss, it's only through some unexpected horrible event that you find joy. And so I would just remember that going, and I'm not saying I think Trump is gonna lose it. Trump is winning as of right now. That's a fact. The internal polls are the only ones you can believe on both campaigns, because they're the only ones that have no incentive to lie. Both have Trump up in the key, sufficient to get to 270 electoral votes. So I don't know what's gonna happen. All I know is, I think if Trump loses, do I think Trump would lose in a free and fair election? Of course not. Do I think 2020 was stolen? It was stolen. That's why you're not allowed to say it. You think there's a reason? One of the things you can't question on YouTube, the vax and the 2020 election. I mean, I just know in my own life, if I'm lying about something, I don't want to talk about it. You know what I mean? I don't want to talk about that. Oh, I don't want to talk about that. Because I'm lying, that's why. Are you worried about talking about anything you're telling the truth about? Of course not. You're happy to talk about it. So of course they're gonna do it again or try. I don't know if they're gonna succeed or not, but I know that people are so aware of what's up now. They're so aware of what's up. Yeah. And I'm actually really hopeful about where things are going.
I am too. And by the way, your Mike Lee conversation
Yeah?
is the best ever. I had no idea he knew the Constitution inside and
he's
out.
amazing.
And if you have not heard the conversation between Senator Mike Lee and Tucker, you need to go find it on his network, because I listened to it twice because it was so fascinating to me.
And it was all him being fascinating. I was like sitting there like, I mean, my job is cool because, especially now when I don't have to talk as much, you know, you can really listen. And like, I've covered this stuff my whole life and I don't understand a lot of it. And just getting smart people like Mike Lee, I can't tell you how different he is from most other, not all, but most other Republican senators who follow this like very familiar arc where, you know, they start out, they're like, oh, I'm representing my people, I'm really conservative, you know, I'm against the powers that be. And then they're like, oh, I got invited to the Munich Security Conference. Okay. And the next thing you know, they're like, got to defeat Putin. What? You know, what about Asheville? Oh, that's not important. You know, they all wind up there. And Lee is, for some reason, something quirk of personality, he's like become this incredible figure. I mean, I really hope that he serves in the Trump administration. I don't know if he will, but I want him to.
It was a great conversation.
He's so good.
So we have about 5 minutes left. It's 5 minutes, people. It flew by again really quickly. But to get our country back, we need all people voting.
Yeah.
And there's a huge block of voters, potential voters, that we're trying to get out. It's the hunters and the sportsmen all over this country. They don't want to leave the woods and go vote.
Yeah.
Which is really...
I'm one of them. No, I mean, I don't want to leave the woods at all.
So the question really is can you talk to them, because you are a hunter, you're a sportsman, can you talk to them about the importance of them getting out of the woods and voting?
Yeah, I mean, you should, I mean, I try to, because I do spend I brought my dogs, they're here in Wisconsin today.
And they're beautiful.
And not for the first time, yeah, I love my dogs. And they're hunting dogs, and they're spaniels, and I think they're really, really smart. I know they're smart. But they don't speak English really at all. And, you know, don't have a higher education, no degree, but they really get things. And one of the things that they're so good at detecting is who doesn't like them. I was in an elevator with them today in the hotel that we're in, and this lady gets in, and my dogs are very attractive, I must say. If they were women, they'd be smoking hot.
They would be. They're beautiful.
They would. They're beautiful, and they're great grouse dogs, but they sleep on my bed. But this woman gets in, and she's like, oh, dogs. You know, my dogs are the nicest dogs ever. And she's like, oh, I hate dogs. I could just feel it on her. And my dogs are like, oh, you hate me. And they back up. They just instantly knew who hated them. And I wish hunters were the same way and fishermen were the same way. They hate you. They hate nature. That's why they're bulldozing forests to put in solar panels. Really? How is it better for the environment to bulldoze pine trees to put in some plastic garbage from China? I mean, maybe you get rich from it. Okay, fine. But if you're telling me that's green, how is it green to bulldoze my forest or cut off the top of my mountains right next to my house, which they have done, to put in your stupid windmills?
Oh, yes.
That's green? It's green to destroy nature? Like, I'm not a genius. I didn't actually go to Harvard or even graduate college, but I know that that's a lie because it's obvious. And I don't understand. So they hate nature, actually. They don't know anything about it. They spend no time in nature. Name 3 bird species. What's the difference between a conifer and a deciduous? Do you know? Oh, we need to lecture me about climate change. Shut up. Go away. You don't know anything. You don't live in a place where you can see the stars. You don't care at all about nature. In fact, you hate it because God created it, and it's prettier than anything you could ever create. That's why you build public housing and dollar stores, to desecrate nature. And so the people in charge are our enemies. People who love nature, who spend a lot of time in nature, particularly sportsmen who think a lot about what animals think. The one thing that experience gives you is humility, because you're not in charge of nature. You never will be. It's way bigger and more powerful than you. God created it, you didn't. And so you come out of that experience knowing that you're not the wisest, most powerful person in the universe. God is. That's what you learn. Whether you believe in God or not, you know that you're not more powerful than nature. But if you're Kamala Harris or any of these people who spend their lives in some drywall-clad room with a drop ceiling and fluorescent lighting, they can convince themselves, because they live digitally on the freaking internet, that they're the most powerful, wise person in the world. They can lie to themselves. Sportsmen cannot. And so they are our enemies. And the fact that hunters and fishermen don't intuitively understand that drives me insane. So all these people are like, oh, hunters and fishermen, like I'm in charge of hunters and fishermen. I mean, please, I'm not, for sure. But the idea that they don't vote is so crazy, I don't really understand it. Or maybe they're telling us something even deeper, I don't know. Or maybe they're just in the woods because election season does come during bear season, deer season, grouse season, depending on your region. There's a lot of game, out there during election week. So maybe that's what it is. I don't know what it is, but they should be voting forcefully,
So their land doesn't disappear from them.
They're literally taking the land away.
Right.
They're using your tax dollars through land trusts to tie up land for the worst people in the world. So you can only mountain bike on it or something.
Right.
Or drive your electric bike, but you can't hunt or fish or camp. They use tax dollars to tie up this land where I live. Mm-hmm. And I used to give a ton of money to land trusts because I was just random rich person, oh, you're for nature, I'm on your side. Where are we gonna give money? We give money to the land trust. It turns out they're using tax dollars to tie up this land and keep people off the land, to keep people from enjoying nature. And they're all from New York, and they all have a political agenda. They're disgusting. They hate the locals. And I would just say, the last thing I'll say is, if you love nature, you have to respect rural people. If you have contempt for rural people, go back to Milwaukee or New York or Los Angeles, leave.
Right.
If you show up in some place because you actually hate diversity, you sent money to Black Lives Matter, but you don't want to live near black people, which is so true of all these people. They run for the mountains. They all go to Bozeman, okay, because they're hypocrites. It's the whitest place they can find, and they move there. That is totally real. I can't even go to Bozeman anymore. I've been going there my whole life. I can't go there anymore because people yell at me at the organic grocery store, people from LA. It's like, get out of here. But the first thing they bring with them, along with their bad politics, is total contempt for the locals. Right. The people who've been there for 100 years, or land grant families, been there for 200 years. And they have their own weird rituals and their way of living, and these people show up and they have total contempt for them. That's not allowed. That shouldn't be allowed. You can't move into someone's community and have contempt for them, have hatred for them, for their traditions and their culture and their way of speaking and thinking. Yeah, they drink a few beers in the truck. Leave them alone. Right. I mean it.
Yeah.
Anyway, whoa.
All right, well, we are...
Sorry.
I don't want to end with leave me alone.
No, but it's true. If you claim you love nature, if you're going to lecture me about climate change, then how dare you move into a rural area and start getting uppity with the people at the hardware store? That is the worst. I cannot deal with that.
Right.
We have entire disgusting concrete suburbs that you can live in outside Boston. You can crawl back to Bethesda, Maryland in your artificial hell and go to Whole Foods. But what the hell are you doing in my town? Hell yeah, and they're doing it here too. Woo!
Especially if there's a coffee pot at the hardware store.
Yeah.
All right, one last question, and then we're going to really have to go. We want to end on joy. What does Joe Freedom or Lily Liberty really need to do now, moving forward, that will preserve our liberty?
Oh, live like you're free. The main thing people need to do is get off the internet and live like you're free. Lead by example. Live a free life with your own opinions. If you don't want to wear deodorant, don't wear it. It's got weird aluminum chemicals in it. Probably shouldn't. But live like you're truly free. Say what you really think. Be cheerful. Spend your life making beautiful things. Have a job that actually makes the country better. Produce something worth having. If your job consists of oppressing people, say with debt, maybe you should rethink what you do for a living. I mean it too. If you want to make America better, make it better. And indulge your creative impulses. That is, apart from communing with people you love, the other great source of joy in this life is making something beautiful. Whether it's a house or a handicraft, we judge cultures. Archaeologists judge entire periods of history by the things that people made with their hands. That is the purest expression of a culture. What do you make? It's one of the reasons I love Milwaukee, as screwed up as it is. I always say every time I'm in Milwaukee, I said to my wife the other day, we were in Milwaukee, I was like, we should put the Germans, I don't love, by the way, but we should put them in charge of building all of our cities. Because look at what they built. And the Germans, in their weird, constipated way, were totally committed to building beautiful things. They have apartment buildings. I don't even like apartments. They have apartment buildings in Milwaukee that are like breathtakingly beautiful. I was coming out of an AA meeting in some sketchy part with Bobby Kennedy Jr., some sketchy part of Milwaukee, probably get mugged on the street. I saw this apartment building. I was like, who built that? Someone took time to put these cornices in that were just beautiful. A terracotta roof, really, in an apartment building? They went so far above and beyond what you need to do to house people in a honeycomb building just because they wanted to create something beautiful. And I thought, I don't know who these long dead German architects and builders were, but God bless them, because their expression of what was in their hearts, beauty, lives on long after their names have been forgotten. Be that person. Build something beautiful, whether it's children, whether it's a front lawn, whether it's a flower bed. The work of your hands enhances the community, the society, the civilization that you live in. Keep that in mind. Make something beautiful, and you will make it a better country. I think that.
America the Beautiful.
Amen.
Thank you.
James O'Keefe's Line in the Sand premiering only on TCN on October 10th. You can sign up to watch at tuckercarlson.com. James O'Keefe's new documentary, Line in the Sand, at tuckercarlson.com.